do they have something going on with the train?
Okay. I'll be over in a day or two.
Well, yeah, I'll be there all day tomorrow, yeah. Saturday morning, I've got to set
Yes.
or Friday morning, I'm setting bleachers, and then I'm leaving.
Okay. All right.
She said she had.
Leaving on the night train?
Well,
Not on the city night train.
well, my daughter's getting married on Saturday.
congratulations.
So I have
You
a
better
few
be
things,
there.
I have a few things on the list. from
You got to
my-
catch up
My
before you get
wife
out
has
there.
a small list for me to get.
A small list.
You know,
A small
that is the
list.
shortest
Yeah.
walk in the world,
Yeah,
is walking your daughter down the aisle.
well, and then,
Oh,
of
yeah.
course, I did Mayfield Township Monday night, Garfield Township
Yep.
last night, I'm here tonight, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
my list
Congrats.
isn't getting any shorter.
No.
Okay, if I could have your attention, please. We'll call the Ways and Means Committee meeting to order for Wednesday, February 15th at 7 p.m. If anybody has a cell phone, would you turn it off or put it on silent so we don't have to throw you out?
Glad you said that.
And we'll start with pledge of allegiance to the flag. Would you lead us with that, Ross?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item, we'll have the clerk call roll call, please.
Commissioner Gilman,
Here.
Inman,
Here?
Henschel,
Yes.
Lemko,
Yes.
Richardson,
Here.
Thomas.
Yep.
Axbauer.
Yes.
Wheelock,
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Fleece.
Present. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. We have two of them. The first one's January 18th, 2012, the regular session.
Move for approval for the minutes for January 18th, 2012.
Second. Been moved and seconded to approve them as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimous. Second one is closed session minutes from January 18th, 2012.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the closed session minutes from January 18th.
Support.
Been moved and supported to approve the closed session minutes from January 18th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same. And would you pass those minutes back to the clerk, please? Next item is the first public comment, and we'll have the clerk read the rules for public comment.
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners, which is required to be open to the public under the provisions of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. Chairperson may at his or her discretion extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone desiring to speak at the first public comment? Hi, Jason.
Jason Jones, Parks and Recreation Director. I'm just here to remind all of you and invite you, in case you've forgotten about the Parks and Recreation Workshop. It's going to be held February 29th at the Civic Center at 1:30.
Okay.
Workshop was originally set up and kind of the brainchild of Pete Doran, our Parks and Recreation Commission President. And he wanted to get together with all of the other Parks and Recreation Commissioners throughout Grand Traverse County.
Oh, okay.
So what we've done is we've put together a 3-hour workshop. It's free, and we've been fortunate enough to be sponsored by Gosling Zubeck for this opportunity. So it's a free workshop for all commissioners in the county, including this commission, all Parks and Recreation Commissioners throughout the county. The first 90 minutes is going to be a kind of a networking opportunity for each commissioner to talk a little bit about what their Parks and Recreation Department specifically is doing and introduce themselves to the group. The second half of that 3-hour session is going to be a workshop with I don't want to say a lecture, but an informational workshop taught by Harry Burkholder from LIAA. He's going to be talking about partnering for Parks and Recreation success. all the way up to development of parks and recreation authorities, as well as giving examples of where parks and recreation authorities have worked, different methods for those authorities working, and just general partnering for parks and recreation success. So I'd invite you all to it. There's flyers that have gone around. If you need more flyers and want to distribute to the townships, all the townships have been invited. We have 27 RSVPs as of so far. So we're looking forward to this being a good event, and we'd love to see you there.
Jason, if you don't mind my asking, what is Gosling Zubek's role in this, and why are they interested in it?
Gosling Zubek, they do a variety of different engineering services. They have a history of parks and recreation plans, and frankly, they're based here in Traverse City, but have not done a tremendous amount of work locally. The majority of their work comes from outside of of the county.
Okay.
So this is they look at this as an opportunity to reach out and talk a little bit about the services they provide to the community.
Okay, and what does sponsoring mean? I mean, it's at the county's location. Are they renting the room for this?
No, they're actually,
Providing refreshments?
they're providing refreshments and paying for the speaker fees.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Jason? Thank you, Jason.
Great, have a good night.
Is there anyone else desiring to speak? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Jason?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move we approve the agenda with the correction of the remonumentation contract, page 9.
Support.
Been moved, supported by Herb. Been moved and supported to approve the agenda with the correction on page 9. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion passes. Next item is presentation of Eagle Scout certificates. Is George Townsend here tonight? Larry, Mr. Chairman, would you explain to the viewing audience and the audience here what the certificates of accomplishment are for?
Yes,
We have two of them.
Yes. On an annual basis, we get a letter of acknowledgement from the Boy Scouts, I believe, of America, of individuals in our community that have achieved the Eagle Scout designation, and it's been our tradition to acknowledge those individuals and give them a certificate of accomplishment. So we have two tonight, one for George Townsend and one for Elijah Little. And if either one are here, we'd love to at least present you in public and congratulate you for your achievement and give you a certificate on behalf of the County Board of Commissioners. So if either one is here, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Herb?
Being on the council board, our council has over 50 Eagle Scouts every year, and about 3% of all the boys that are in scouting become Eagle Scouts, which is sets the standard for the national averages for Eagle Scouting in our community. And it is quite an accomplishment, and it's almost equal to a couple of years of college education when you get that Eagle Scout. I must say that Sonny Wheelock is an Eagle Scout. I don't know if anybody else on our board. Rob Henschel is an Eagle Scout, so we have two Eagle Scouts here on our board. So.
Okay, thank you, Herb. Okay, moving along.
So is
next-
Elijah here tonight?
No, Chris
And-
left
and
me a
George
note that
Townsend's
he
not
wouldn't be here, but she
Okay.
wasn't sure on George Townsend.
So we'll extend
And-
that invitation to them at the board meeting. If they can't make it, we'll get it mailed to them.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Would you read the consent calendar, please?
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere in the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file or approval, is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file, none. B, approval, 1, 2012 remonumentation grant acceptance. 2, 2012 remonumentation program contracts. 3, award of housing funds, home buyer purchase rehabilitation grants. 2. C, action. There is nothing on the action.
Thank you. Does anyone in the audience wish to have anything removed from the consent calendar? Seeing none, does anyone on the board? Rob?
Items B1 and B2?
B1 and B2?
Yeah.
Anyone else?
B3.
We now have no consent calendar.
Always wanted to remove everything.
What's hard this time?
Do we have to vote on the consent calendar?
There isn't one.
Okay. Next item is items removed from the consent calendar, and we'll start with B1. Rob?
Yeah, I was kind of discussing an idea with Chairman Inman. Currently, the grant that is coming in for remonumentation process, basically, we're having government employees travel out to locations and make sure their monuments are correct and take some measurements. But while they're out there, they are currently not taking any GPS readings. And I did check with Dean, and this approval is not due until August at the latest. I was wondering if we could delay this approval a month and perhaps get some more information, or maybe if someone else has more information. Sonny's giving me that look like maybe he knows something.
Very little this week.
But if we're going to spend taxpayers' dollars, let's make sure we're doing it as smart as possible. Maybe there could be something included in this program and in this contract that while they're out there on site, they could be taking the GPS readings so that we don't just have to go do it all over again when it, for the GIS department. So, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Dick? I think Dick spoke to that earlier.
Did you?
They gave us a reason 4 or 5 years ago why they weren't doing GPS. And partly is, when they started this program, it's been so long ago, there wasn't any GPS. So, I would have to say that they probably want more money to do it, even though all they gotta do is this. Once they find the corners, all they gotta do is go back to them and punch the button.
Right, and that's what I mean.
But-
You have to go travel back to all
Howard,
these locations and take another reading.
yeah, Howard Walker seems to know more about this than most people, and he said that he didn't think, well, remember the other day, he didn't think there was any money coming for that. And,
Well, how much money can it cost if you're already there to pull out a device and hit a button and write down 3 numbers,
well,
4 numbers, whatever it is?
because according to him, they have to go back to reference points too.
Reference-
Don't ask me, I don't even
Okay.
have one.
Well, I would move that we refer this to the March Ways and Means meetings and ask staff to bring more information regarding the remonumentation process and the possibility of GPS, how much would it cost to integrate that with this program?
I'd support that.
All right.
Okay, are you aware that it's, the program 71% complete?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we could have 30% of the GPS coordinates all done at the end of this program.
Sonny?
Well, I guess first, there's 2 pieces of this. First is to accept the grant. And I think that we should do no matter what, because the grant acceptance, we have to accept the money, and there is no local match required from that grant. The other thing is in regard to the GPS coordinates, and I too have asked multiple times of why we didn't get the GPS coordinates at the time, and I've repeatedly been told that it would be easier to identify all of the corners first and then go back and get the GPS coordinates. But if we get the corners properly mapped, it'll take nothing to go back and get the GPS coordinates. And that's what, Bob Mitchell has sat here and told us repeatedly that we needed to finish all of the corners and get them mapped properly, and then we can go back and get the GPS coordinates. I don't know. I'm not a GPS guy. I don't know the answer to that. But the one thing that he stressed repeatedly is that we need to finish the mapping process first. So, I would tend to defer that decision to him. It's what he's done for us for the last 20 years.
And
So
that's what he said when he was here.
and that's what he said when he was here last week. also. So, you know, I won't support the motion to hold up the contract, because the other thing that I've been told over the years repeatedly is that they need to do this before any foliage starts to grow on the trees. So if we delay this thing another month or month and a half, and we get spring coming, you know, we could start to where they wouldn't get the 20 corners that we need to get this year. So, you know, they have to do it before the leaves start coming on the trees.
Larry?
Well, if we went ahead and approved it as presented, we would have at least till our board meeting to have staff, Dean, or someone else check with GIS and equalization and the surveyor and just clarify the question so we could make the final decision at our board meeting. I mean, that would be one way of handling it.
And that's in 2 weeks, right?
Right.
So,
I think you have plenty of time to look into it.
Okay.
So we might want to just pass it and thinking about it and then just clarify it at the board meeting.
Dean, do you think, is that feasible?
Definitely.
Okay, I'll withdraw the
Ask
motion.
the questions.
That's fine.
okay, Herb?
I make a motion to approve the remonumentation grant.
Motion that we have to, oh, did we?
Yes, we have to
I'm sorry, I missed that.
You're talking about B1?
Yeah.
Is there support? Dick supports it. Everybody understand the motion?
To accept the grant.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's unanimous. Okay, B2, Rob, you're on again?
Same thing.
Same
Well,
thing?
there's a correction.
We have
Yeah.
correction here.
Did everybody see the correction on the funds?
Let me explain that too. The reason for the change in the contract services component of the grant is because the actual monument corners, the grant application was submitted with an estimated amount. The cost for the corners increased slightly, and because the grant is fixed at $51,126, Reiner Reichert was able to convince the surveyors to just reduce certain components of their cost. So the supplies cost went up, and we're adjusting the contract services here accordingly to stay within the grant balance. That's the reason for the change.
Motion to approve the contract as revised.
Second.
Been, Dick supported it already.
All right, okay.
Been moved and supported to approve the program contract. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Inman,
Yes.
Henschel,
Yes.
Lemko,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yep.
Axbauer,
No.
Wheelock,
Yes, ma'am.
Gilman,
Yep.
Chairman Flees.
Yes, motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, I think that motion should say that it's the revised.
Your motion did say revise.
So I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, you had that in your motion, Herb.
If you didn't, we did.
Okay, next item is award of housing funds, home buyer purchase rehabilitation grants, 2 of them. And Jason?
In 2008, this country went through pretty much of a shakeup, largely in part due to a number of people upside down in their homes, people that couldn't afford their homes. They owed more than the homes were worth. They couldn't get out of them. They were abandoning them, and it created a real problem, and we're still feeling the effects of it. This grant does a lot of what caused some of that in the first place. It's the government encouraging people who cannot own a home without this help to buy a home and take on that particular liability. People who would not be able to afford a home are getting into these homes, and they can't afford to keep them. It's redistribution. It's irresponsible, and it's not necessarily good for these homeowners either, especially given some new rules that are coming down in the mortgage industry. Some of the new rules, it's changing so that the debt can follow these people for the rest of their lives. And you can't bankrupt out of it, and these are some of the new mortgage rules, and it's very important to understand this, and I encourage people to research this and understand what I'm talking about. But we're creating a situation where we're taking taxpayer money, we're facilitating the purchase of homes by people who cannot afford to own the homes. We're encouraging people to stay in homes that they own, that they can't afford to repair, and we're just moving their problems down the road a little further where we're going to be picking up a bigger tab. So I disagree with these types of grants, and I frankly, I wish the government would stop trying to manipulate economic well-being in this manner. So I have to vote no on this.
Russ?
Well, first of all, I'd like to make a motion to approve the acceptance of the housing grants as presented.
Support.
And then I'd like to take a little bit of issue with what Commissioner Gilman was saying, because what these grants are designed to do is to help people buy houses that need a little work. They're houses that generally pretty decent, but they need some fixing up here and there. So specifically, the grant is home purchase and repair. So they provide funds not only to help people with that initial down payment, but also to help them with some, minor to medium type repairs to make the house more livable and also to make it more marketable. And hopefully they will help remove some of the backlog of housing that we have in foreclosure right now moving forward, and help people get housing, which they so desperately need right now.
Sonny?
Well, Ross is exactly right. This is not only a purchase program, but it allows people to purchase homes or rehabilitate the home that they currently live in to make it, safe and, somewhat feasible for them to continue to stay in that. But one remarkable thing about this particular grant, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time anyone in northern Michigan has seen a MSHDA grant for purchase and rehabilitation that wasn't absolutely tied to the core community. This is the first time that we've ever seen a MSHDA grant that wasn't tied to within the city of Traverse City. And we got MSHDA to approve, through a lot of work by our planning department and the land bank and a lot of other people, the Council of Governments, we actually got MSHDA to approve funding purchase and rehabilitation inside the village of Kingsley and inside the village of Fife Lake. And that is absolutely unheard of statewide. So, I think, and I think all of you have heard me say before, we need more affordable housing in this community, but it doesn't, I'm not going to go to Mayfield Township and tell somebody, I'll help you with your home, but you got to move to downtown Traverse City. This is the first time we've been able to see Out County actually see MSHDA grant dollars to stay in their homes. And that's a really good thing in my mind.
Jason?
Just to further point out, there are a lot of people that cannot afford to buy a home. And there are a lot of people who would be on the edge and qualify for one of these assistance programs who won't be able to get it because there isn't enough of it to go around. So it's just going to be some select people, whoever's just lucky enough to win that particular government lottery this time around. And again, we're all paying for it, though. Even the people who don't get it, we're all paying for it. It's inappropriate for government to take the taxpayer money and give it to people. It's called redistribution. It's a socialist concept. That's what it is. And, again, I'd like to point out, it was this very type of thing which caused the problems we had starting in 2008. You can call it community reinvestment. You can call it any number of things, but what it is, it's taking from some and giving to others directly. And it's wrong. And, there was another point I really wanted to make, but I guess the other point was that if you want affordable housing, get planning and zoning out of the way. Okay? You want affordable property for people so they can do it on their own. You don't mandate a 1,200 square foot living space in a particular community so people can build a smaller home. I'll tell you, my brother, he was one, he could live in a shed. And and he'd be comfortable. But because a government agency says that he can't live in a shed because it isn't big enough, even though he might have all the comforts that he needs, you know, it's that kind of stuff that really makes home ownership unaffordable. It's government that makes home ownership unaffordable. And this stuff is just a fix that's artificial. So I can't support this. I still call it redistribution, and just because that's what it is.
John, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this? Okay, thank you. Everybody set to vote then?
Yep.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Henschel.
Yes.
Lemko.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yep.
Max Bauer.
No.
Wheelock.
Yes.
Gilman.
Nope.
Inman.
Yes.
Yes.
Chairman Fleece.
In the motion we just voted on, I do have to agree with Jason on one point. When I was a young man growing up, we had a neighbor. He was a bachelor, never been married, and he lived in probably, it was a shack, but it was nice and warm and toasty in there. And it was probably 8 feet wide by 12 feet wide. That might be being generous. It was very small. But he lived in there all the years I was growing up, and he continued to live there after I grew up until he finally died at a ripe old age of 90. And I have to agree with Jason, due to zoning and so forth. I think the minimum allowed is 800 square feet, which makes you wonder why one person would have to have that much room if they didn't want that much room. But so I agree with him on part of his explanation. Dick?
And I agree with Jason that it's redistribution. But it's very seldom we get a chance to do any redistributing here. And, that's the powers above that control that. And when they offer you, you almost have to take it for the people in Kingsley and Fife Lake.
For the audience here and the viewing audience, the two grants we're talking about, Mr. grants, there was one for $195,000 to serve the village of Kingsley and the village of Fife Lake, and the other one's for $250,000 to serve the city of Traverse City. So it's more than a few pennies. Okay, next item on the agenda is information technology, web streaming of board and committee meetings, and I believe we have Don Sheehan here to talk about that.
Good evening.
Good evening, Don.
Yeah, this was something that Dennis had asked me to take a look at, and actually I think we were going to take a look at it, and then that was when Katie left the office, so we haven't gotten to it as soon, but came back and said, let's take a look at the county's web streaming. So currently we're using a service called IQM2. So the web streaming is the digital form that's out there, and so we're paying them $750 a month for that service. And actually could have gone back when the committees probably went down from 6 to 4 and had asked for a reduction, but that never happened in there. But so the other option is Leah has come in and offered to do this service. And I know they're doing it for Garfield Township right now, and I believe anybody that's in the charter franchise group is also included in there. But what they do, they do record our meetings right now. They also do the cable broadcasting for 8 committees. But the county right now on the web streaming side is only paying to have 4 of them done. So the other committees here, I guess if they were going to pay to have theirs streamed, would those committees pay to have that done themselves? And that's part of, they've opted not to do it through the IQM2 service, and it would still be a choice if they went over to the Leah service. I also asked, because we've posted meetings out there, other types of media. We've had some educational type ones, and actually we're going to be recording one as we go to Google Apps. We're going to record that meeting. So it's nice to be able to push out other types of media if we record them. The Circuit Court just did one for their e-filing project and had that recorded. And so we want to be able to make sure that we could put those out there and then people could see those on demand. I also wanted to bring up, I think I didn't actually watch the last meeting there, but Chris Kramer had mentioned that Dennis said we'd had issues with the website. Those were with the county website, not with the IQM2 and the web streaming. So I just want to make sure that, this service, as far as I know, we've never had a glitch in the web streaming service. So, I mean, it's been very reliable, and so I just want to make sure that's out there. The IQM2 service also offers, it's an additional product that you'd have to pay for, and I don't know the pricing right now, but it allows electronic agenda creation, where departments can submit their agenda items electronically, and then Chris would be able to say, take those all together and create a packet from that, and it would all be built into the site. We're not using that feature now, but I guess if we leave IQM2 and the new administrator comes in and says, hey, that's something I'd like to do, we've just switched off a vendor that had that capability to build in with what we already have. So also just wanted to make you aware of that. I guess primarily, I think what, if we go over to Leah, would be the search capability. And part of the search, though, that's there right now is because Chris does take the clerk's minutes, she kind of restructures, puts them into IQM2, and it is a nice feature if you're going back doing the search. When you find that item, you can click on it, and if that meeting's been indexed, it takes you right to that point in the video just based on your text search. Leah, I think, can add the search capability, at least they said they can, but I'm still not sure you're going to get that same. You'll be able to find that item, but I think you'll still have to go actually to the agenda, click the topic to get to that point. I guess I'm not 100% certain. I mean, it's up to you to weigh these. I think, for what most people are doing, for how they're using the site, for using it, that, Leah's probably going to provide a very good job at what they're doing there.
In either format right now, do we have long-term archiving? I mean, like you say, with IQM2 right now, it's saved for roughly 3 years.
Right.
Is there any beyond that, or does it just disappear into the nether?
We just disappear. And actually, I think with our IQM2, technically, we're not under contract anymore with them, even though we're just paying that monthly amount. I believe when we originally went, it was going to be about a 2-year, and they just have not removed any media, but, they could do that. I don't believe there's any legal obligation to keep that. Digital media, the board minutes that come from the clerk's office, I believe, are the official record of what does. And so I don't know, once you start recording them, is there a retention time frame that we would have to abide by?
So, now I had a little, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I was just a little confused, and then, as far as the format, will the format be the same as far as the type of streaming media? I mean, will it be this, I'd like to be able to just download it as an MPEG, for example.
Yeah, usually, the download of it is going to take you hours. So in most cases, this is much better to have it streamed and come through that way. When they get pushed up to them right now, it happens after the meeting is over. It streams live, but then after that, then it pushes it up, and some of those are taking a good part of the night just to get pushed up. So in most cases, the streaming capability is the better option.
What would you prefer?
Well, I prefer the stream.
No, as far as between these two, we're looking at potentially a cost savings of, what, half? If we were to go with 2-year retention, if I'm looking at this right, and maybe I'm not.
It's even more than that, because, we're paying right now $9,000 annually, and it depends on whether you're doing 4 meetings or 8 meetings, as to what you're going to pay, too. We're currently paying for 4, so if we do 4 meetings, plus also have the option of the other media, that's where I put that's at $2,250. It's a significant price difference in what you're paying.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So we could do all 8 meetings for $4,500,
Correct.
which is still half of what we're paying now,
Right.
and deal with a local purveyor instead of...
Right.
And that would be a web-streamed product?
Right. Yep, and we still have the ability to do the indexing of the agendas so that you could click on an item within the agenda and take you to that specific point in the meeting.
Chris?
Just as a matter of disclosure, I am on the advisory board for Leah, for their Up North media. I receive no payment or compensation in any way, shape, or form. I don't benefit from it at all, other than I support public television. So I just wanted to let the board know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ross?
Rob had also asked, I think, about using YouTube as a service. And so I posed that same question to Leah just to see what they would have to say, and I think we were kind of in agreement. I think you're going to get maybe a higher level of compatibility with YouTube, but we do lose the capability of indexing the video. And also, right now, I mean, that's a free service that's out there that could go away next month. I mean, you would be relying on something that, is not a guaranteed service, since it's not something we're paying for.
Since you mentioned it, have you considered archiving the meetings on our own server with our own bandwidth? I'm looking at they say $225 a year for 45 gigabytes. I mean, you can get 20 times that in a terabyte drive for $225.
Yeah, usually it's, in most cases, though, most places are going through a video service because of the streaming and the amount of bandwidth that it takes. The county has 15 megabytes of internet bandwidth that we share with all of our major facilities here right now. So, and streaming is, I mean, they are coding those packets to make sure that, it's not interrupted.
Is it megabytes or megabits?
Megabits, well.
That's a huge difference. It's eightfold.
Right, well,
bits per byte.
Ours is megabyte is what our internet bandwidth is at. But, so to stream it out of here, usually they would recommend that you have some form of a streaming server to ensure that they're going to get the level of quality of the video. And even,
Well, you can just download the MPEG.
but usually they're huge. So, I mean, if you actually
Yeah, 200-300 megabytes. I've actually downloaded 500 gigabytes of art, because the streaming file is actually an MPEG file you can download with just a couple clicks.
Right. But, I mean, even there, you still need a broadband connection. And, I mean, most people
Yeah.
only want to go in and watch a portion of the meeting versus, I guess, pulling the whole thing down.
Yeah.
So, Leah themselves actually goes through, the company that hosts I think quite a bit of their equipment is Laytronics. And actually, they're not hosting the video themselves either. It's sitting out at another vendor site.
Ross, did you have something?
No, that's okay.
Okay, Larry?
So, to conclude this conversation, I guess, you're recommending, Leah, and we have a reduction price, and they're going to provide the same product at the same quality?
Yeah, I wasn't the one actually making the recommendation, but I'm perfectly fine with whichever way you go.
I'll make a motion that we go with Leah, the Leah proposal as presented.
Second.
So my only question, Larry, would be just to do the same 4 meetings we're doing now for the time being? or-
Correct.
And worry about expansion later?
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to determine if we want to do any more than what we're doing right now, because we're only web streaming our meetings. The rest of them
Right.
the rest of them are being televised, but they're not being web streamed.
Correct, and that's,
Yeah.
I kind of asked Dean, and yeah, I think your opinion was that if those other committees would like it done, then they should be paying to have that
Right.
done as that.
Right, in the case of at least 3 of the 4, they're different entities in terms of their funding source. Parks and Recreation is more of an internal function, but, that should be something that those committees would have to discuss. I certainly wouldn't want to just sit here and say that the county should absorb that cost without some discussion. But, however, the cost per meeting decreases if we would go to 5 versus the 4. The per meeting cost drops from
Well, that's true.
$225 down to $175. So I would think, though, that we would have flexibility with Leah to make those changes or to add.
At any time.
Yep. I would hope we could do that.
Sonny and then Chris?
Okay, I guess I'm still a little bit confused on, so you got to help me through this. You've been doing this a long time here. I guess the one piece that I had about is this one-time cost of $1,200. That
That's
is
if you want-
certainly in the recommendation, right?
That's if you want to add the searching capability. I think administration probably uses that as much as anybody. I'm not sure if the public is using that feature that much. And actually, administration, if they save the minutes, have out there within a directory, they would still have search capability of going through and searching. It's not quite as convenient to be right there and take them directly to the video.
But it does make sense that we would want to have that searching capability for the public to use it.
Right.
For a one-time cost of $1,200.
Right, and they're saying they could add searching to their site, and then actually they're willing to do that. Right now, we would get intermixed with other governmental units that are there, so when they're doing a search, it would bring up Garfield and their information too. So is that a good thing, or do we actually want it separate so that when they're searching, they're really only searching the county things, and so there's not as much to filter through?
At least in my mind, I'd like to have it filtered so as when you're talking
Right.
about what the county's talking about with Parks and Recreation, you get the county discussion. You
Right.
don't,
Right.
or the dams or whatever, you don't get, if you type in the dams, I want to see what the county is discussing about it, not what the city has talked
Right.
about it, or Garfield Township has talked about it, or the construction, Soil Conservation District or one of those. I want the county stuff separated and filtered, and I want that search capability.
Chris?
Well, at every advisory board meeting, we see the upgrades that Leah is doing constantly. They're going to be able to do this, and I think more as time marches on. The plans that they have to upgrade their equipment are really quite exciting. But I do have a question for you. What happens, I intend to support this motion, and if it passes and we switch to Leah, what happens to our present meetings online?
I'm not sure we'll get them from there. They do have a terabyte drive that they are using in administration. I'd have to go back and look, but I believe that they have been archiving all of the meetings since we've been doing it. It probably would be...
Well, I just don't want to lose, the last year or whatever. I just don't want it to go out in Never Never Land.
Right. We could probably talk to, and actually Leah's been putting some of our meetings out there, even though we haven't been paying them to do it. They aren't indexed, obviously. But I think almost, when I was looking at it, it looked like they had almost a year's worth of our meetings already online. But then we could talk to them and say, could we take more of them off of the media that we have? Would you be willing to push them up there if you do want, more years online?
Okay.
And see if they would, push us out to those 2 years. They might have a service fee just for that time involved to get those meetings up there.
Herb?
Yeah, do we have an idea of, is the capability of recording the number of hits?
Yes.
So
Yeah, so, and actually both sites do, but actually the one that Leah is a nicer one. It's based on the description of the meeting. With the IQM2, they give them all a meeting ID, and then you have to correlate the meeting ID. They can count the number of hits that you get. They can't actually track how long somebody watched the meeting
Right.
for. But they could tell you that somebody clicked on the link to watch that meeting 200 times. or
can we
something.
get that information to the commission before our next meeting that we get there? Because, I think one of the issues that I would have is, what is the cost per viewer to watch our meetings?
You're not going to be able to get that, and I can explain why.
That's why I was asking if we could get the number of hits, so we could get, what would be the cost? I mean, if we got 200 people watching this on a regular basis, and you're going to pay $4,500, your costs are pretty low. But if you got 20 people watching this, and that's all we're hitting is 20 people that are watching our meetings, then, I totally agree that we need to do this, but I question the cost. What's your cost benefit?
I did run some statistics off of what we have on IQM2 right now. These were from October, and I went to January 24, so it's about 4 months. And then this is going to include even if they were doing a search, type thing. But the number of unique page views were 2,563.
Wow, so that's significant.
So, yeah, and I looked at a lot of the meetings. I think when I looked at meetings, it was usually seemed like between 90 and 60 per meeting, the number of hits that you had. Sometimes those could be county staff people going in and look at the meetings too. So, I mean, it's not just the public, it could also be internal people.
And that last point is really critical, I think.
I think so.
Because when we're talking in here, it'd be pretty hard for Linda to write every word and capture the intent of something, or if we miss, on a motion or something, so.
I think that's impressive to know the number,
Well,
the number of people that we are hitting.
right, and a few people are going over to Leah because they are there. And I think that they only gave me county meetings, and they had 459 hits, and that was from December through February. Wow. So you could add those together, really, to say, you know, you have to add those.
3,000 people.
So I think those are good numbers, and I appreciate that.
Larry?
Would there be a difference in, with going with Leah, would it be on Channel 2 rather than 99, or?
No.
It'd stay on 99?
No, they're already doing the cable broadcast, so nothing changes there.
Okay, all right, good. All right, good.
Any other questions for Don?
So I just want to clarify, the motion is to make the move to Leah, including the one-time charge of the $1,200?
Yes.
Everybody understand the motion?
So, and just to clarify, well, there are 4 meetings plus
meetings.
the other media type, which is, you know, those educational type videos. And they're basically treating that other media almost as a meeting. So we're kind of like paying the rate of 5.
Okay, all right. It's fine.
All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Don. Next thing on the agenda is planning and development. Number 1 is the amended brownfield plans for 701 East Front and the Four Corner remediation project, North Division and West Front. And I see we have John.
Yeah, good evening, John Syke, Planning and Development Director for Grand Traverse County, and also I have with us, is it going to introduce yourself?
Scott Howard, Brownfield Attorney.
And there's, and for your consideration this evening, are 2 amended brownfield plans located at the proximity of West Front Street and Division in the city of Traverse City. And these plans have been approved by the Brownfield Authority. They will be going in front of the City Commission on the 21st for concurrence, and then there is a public hearing scheduled for your regular meeting on February 29th. And if you would have any questions, or if you'd like to have Scott go over these at all, or provide some background?
Dick?
Well, I just noticed under subject 701 East Front, that may be an error.
Yes, that's a typo. It should be West Front.
West Front.
Okay.
This is essentially on the southwest corner of Front and Division.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Did I hear that it would require a public hearing? So so this would be information only. We would not be making a motion to move forward without a public hearing. I mean, the motion would occur after the public hearing, would be the protocol. So
Right.
this is just information only right now.
Right, and through the committee process here, and we go to your regular board meeting for
then-
approval after the hearing, and obviously to the, require the city's concurrence.
So you'll just
next
have this
week.
as a public hearing at our board meeting, and then we'll have a motion to approve.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Herb?
Sitting on the Brownfield, I do not remember seeing these numbers come before the Brownfield Committee. I know we passed to go through the plans, but I don't remember seeing the dollar amounts attached to any of those plans in the past. These are brand new, right?
Herb, there's a series of attachments to the Brownfield plan.
Yeah.
And although I haven't gone, Gene goes through line by line, and I haven't done that with the version that I printed out from our Brownfield packet, but the same table is in the actual Brownfield plan that was approved by the Brownfield Authority. There may have been some tweaks to some of those numbers in the meantime, based on what we've received from the consultants or the CVS parcel, but it is all there in what the Brownfield Authority approved.
I just wanted to draw people's attention to the fact of the cost to be able to do this cleanup is not going to be cheap.
No, it's substantial, and just as a really quick background, as you recall, this is the Front and Division parcel where we have 4 historic gas stations and a commingled plume. We've done the identification work that we talked to you about at the last time we were here at the meeting, and this is the next step. The consultants have taken that information and distilled down some potential strategies to remediate it. Just because the numbers are in this Brownfield plan doesn't absolutely mean that they will happen. This is sort of the broad brush, big picture step in the process where we say, what's the limit of what we would do? And so this is sort of our potentially, I guess, worst-case scenario or biggest dollar figures that would be spent at the Four Corners. If for some reason those numbers were to go up, it'd have to come through this process again through an amendment. So this is sort of worst-case scenario, what are we going to do? Usually in every project that I've been involved in since the Brownfield Authority started, all these numbers have actually gone down through the process. But this is the point at which you say, you tell the state, you tell the stakeholders, here's what potentially could happen. And then the last thing I'll remind you all of is that ultimately, the Brownfield statute does allow cost recovery, and the intention of the authority and staff is to pursue potentially liable parties to contribute some or all of these remediation costs.
Ross?
And I think that's what I wanted to ask you about. Specifically, it says, the Brownfield Authority will pursue cost recovery for environmental remediation activities from liable parties to the extent authorized.
Yes.
Because I seem to remember, weren't you before us maybe a couple of years ago talking about filing suit against the responsible parties?
Absolutely, and that may still happen. The next steps are, once the Brownfield plan is approved, we will send out the information and the notices to the potentially liable parties, sort of invite them to discuss it with us. I'm realistic about how willing they might be to actually just agree to paying for some of these items, but we're going to do our best to see if we can't bring everybody in something of a room together and say, look, it makes sense for all of us to coordinate and for you to pay some money towards environmental remediation and work with us and with the state. If that doesn't work, that's sort of the carrot approach, and if that doesn't work, then litigation is the stick, and ultimately before we will file suit, we would obviously be back before you, but that would be the next step if they wouldn't agree to participate.
But meanwhile, the cleanup will proceed. The cleanup will go forward on the Four Corners.
That's correct. There's different components to the cleanup. For example, the state of Michigan will be installing what's called a multi-phase extraction system. The best way that my lawyer mind can wrap its head around that idea is it's kind of like a giant vacuum cleaner that will extract those contaminants out and then strip them and either ventilate them to the air. I think it's ventilate them to the air essentially so that they dissipate, and then they'll have some water discharge, some clean water discharge as a result of that. The state's going to go forward with that project, and they have funding for it no matter what happens here. And that's going to get at some of the source mass underneath the road, which is really one of the big problems. Every time you do some cleanup, or some of the historic cleanups that have been done, they clean a portion of the property up, then contamination flushes through under the road and recontaminates what they've already done. So the state will be going forward with that no matter what. This plan outlines some supplemental activities, and, again, depending on how successful the state is, depending on what the on-site conditions are, we'll implement parts or all of the proposals or the activities that are outlined in this Brownfield plan. But it is still sort of the broad brush. It's not exact. It encompasses ideas that could happen on the property, but they may or may not, depending on site conditions.
Herb?
Yeah, I also want to mention that this is probably one of the few where there's so much collaboration going on between all the parties that are putting this together, and that's what makes it really worthwhile, and what makes it work really well. The other comment I got, that on here it says there are 2 motions needed. It doesn't say anything about a public hearing.
Yeah, that's why I questioned that.
So, I'm questioning.
The public hearing's been in the paper, in the legal notices.
Yeah, but on our recommendation here, it says that we should have 2 motions to approve the amended Brownfield plan. It doesn't say that we should approve a public hearing at our county commission meeting and then we would make these motions to approve. So I guess that's why I'm questioning what our motion should be here.
The process is yours, and I don't know if normally your motion is actually to approve or to recommend approval at your regular board meeting, but the actual approval of these Brownfield plans has to come at the board meeting after the public hearing.
So with that being said, and if you go back to page 17, we do have this somewhat out of order. It clearly indicates we need to have the public hearing at the next board meeting, and the action would be to refer this to the board meeting and schedule that public hearing.
I will make that motion.
Support.
Sonny, did you have something to say?
Well, I guess, I was a little confused when I read this packet because of the 701 piece, because the 701 piece has had significant environmental cleanup has already been done on that, along with the fact that we have a very high-end new structure built on that building, so we don't want to be digging out underneath it again, and I understand the fact that the plume has infiltrated back underneath, but there's also environmentally cleaning equipment on that site that is currently operating. So, I was a little confused, why we had to amend the brownfield plan for the 701 piece, because I thought that piece was all taken care of.
That piece, the infrastructure for the cleanup activities is there, and they have that multi-phase extraction system on site already. The agreement with the new owners of that building was that they were going to operate that for 1 year. So the change to that brownfield plan is just to add funding to continue to operate that multi-phase extraction system.
I wasn't aware of the 1 year thing, but I knew that the equipment was all in place and the excavation was done on that site.
Yeah.
So then the other piece is truly the old Union 76 station, the Barney Castle site, and then the adjacent lots that were residential property that Sugar owns, correct?
Correct.
But it also includes the bank and the Speedway gas station.
Right, but we don't anticipate that we'll be doing excavation on those two sites.
No, but there are.
The plume comes from all four corners, absolutely. We've
But there
done
are
that for a long
systems
time.
on each of those sites that are working, and all those systems are coming together to be operated and be taken care of by the Brownfield Authority.
There likely will be very little, basically, excavation, dig and haul. It'll mostly be operations of systems like the multi-phase extraction system or a sparge system where they introduce air and other nutrients to degrade those contaminants. But those will happen on all four. And I would, just one last item on that is that the state won't let us combine the two existing brownfield plans, so 701 is its own plan. It has to stay separate. Then we combine the rest of the parcels in sort of, for lack of a better term, the Union 76 plan.
Scott, Ross asked you a question earlier regarding a meeting 2-3 years ago.
Yep.
Do you recall that meeting?
I do.
And I thought at the time, my recollection was that we approved a brownfield plan at that time, plus I believe you asked us for permission to pursue the polluters through lawsuits if necessary, and we talked about the length of time that you would go back, and that length of time, if I remember correctly, was like the 60s, or to the 60s and 70s. Is that true?
That is, yes, that's true that we're investigating releases as far back as the 60s and 70s for those liable parties. Anybody who was an owner and had a documented release on those pieces of property, they're all potentially liable for the contamination. And quite honestly, there is enough people in those four corners that they all potentially point the fingers at one another. So the strategy is to get all of our potential liable parties and let the liable parties fight out who is responsible for what, not make that our job. So we discussed that at that meeting. I don't believe that meeting we actually approved a brownfield plan, but you did authorize us to pursue this strategy of looking to the liable parties to facilitate the cleanup. And then the last thing I'll sort of end with on that note is that at the time we had hoped that we would be partnering with the state, and the state would be sort of designing the cleanup and helping us pursue the liable parties. After that, the state politely declined to participate in the cleanup with us. So we've had to do a lot of the groundwork, the environmental consultant work ourselves, and thus the sort of brownfield plans that you've seen and some additional time, quite frankly.
You know, I'm a little concerned that we would start in the 60s. You know, we have records as to who had that property and what they were doing with that property, you know, back, say, when the stations really started pumping in some gallonage or having perhaps leaky tanks. And that had to have started in probably the 20s, but by the 30s, they probably were starting to have problems. I don't understand why we would just go after the latest ones. Why don't we go back to square one?
Because they're still alive.
Because they're not alive anymore.
Well,
Let me just be clear, I haven't looked at the title history recently, but any existing liable party, whether it's from the 30s or 50s or 70s or 80s, any existing liable party we will pursue. So we're not, I didn't mean to imply that we were imposing sort of an artificial time restriction on how far back we were looking. It's just that it looks like that's when the existing liable party, sort of starting in the 60s and 70s and going forward, really sort of came into play on those four corners. But if there's folks that date back further than that, absolutely we'll pursue them.
thank you. Any other questions of Scott or John? Okay, Herb, would you restate your motion, please, so everybody understands it?
To have a public hearing on the motion to approve the two brownfield plans on the 29th of February.
Everybody understand the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's unanimous.
Thank you.
Next item is the resolution of support for the PC Chamber of Commerce Foundation and Northern Initiatives, application to administer to the regional CDBG revolving loan fund. And we have John on board again, and the other gentleman, would you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Phil Franzo from the Traverse City Area Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you.
This is a resolution that is in regard to the county's revolving loan fund that the county has had in place now for over 30 years, and this is a revolving loan fund that provides gap financing to local businesses that are creating jobs in our community. The state of Michigan a couple years ago has been trying to take an approach by regionalizing these funds. There are several of these funds throughout the state of Michigan. I think there's somewhere around 45 of them. Most are at city level government, some of them are at county. In this region here, there's two of them, Grand Traverse County and Benzie County. And so this is a really one step in that process to work towards the state's regionalization of these funds. And this is, I think it was back in August of 2011, we came before you with a concept that talked about having this managed through the Chamber's foundation, along with an agreement in partnership with Northern Initiatives. And that's one of the requirements that the state of Michigan indicated, is that they needed to have these funds partnering with a qualified community development financial institution or a community development corporation. So Northern Initiatives was selected as one to do that. One of the things I think is important to recognize is that while this fund would be relocated to the Chamber's foundation, it would be also a seat at the table by Grand Traverse County and Benzie County on that loan review committee. So that really kind of allows for at least some public oversight in this, in terms of these funds. This resolution is really part of endorsing an application that is going to be going to the state of Michigan that is outlining the approach that we initially presented to the county board previously. Phil's also available here if you have any questions about the actual application.
Sonny, then Ross.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to authorize the application by the Traverse City Chamber of Commerce and Northern Initiatives to be the designated fund manager for the economic development funds.
Second.
Supported by Dick.
Well, I think, I guess my big problem with this thing is I thought we did a really good job of handling this on our own. We absolutely did. The problem is that wasn't the way it was being done throughout the state. So along comes the state and says, well, just because you're doing it right doesn't mean that you're qualified to do it right. So we're going to take it away from you and give it to someone else. I certainly like this idea a lot better than we were looking at a third-party administrator coming out of Marquette or someplace that we looked at in the first go-around. At least, but I guess the biggest thing is, I think that the community and people need to understand we were doing this right in the first place on our own, and then the state come in and told us we had to give it to somebody else to administer.
Ross?
No, this is a recommendation that's come out of the county EDC, and we've been, struggling is probably too strong a word. We've been playing with this for 8 or 9 months now, ever since the state told us basically that they were going to take the fund away. I think this final result actually works out pretty well. There's a couple good things about it. It increases the size of the fund substantially because Grand Traverse County's fund is about $1.5 million right now, and I think Benzie is another $1 million.
It's about $1 million.
About $1 million? Okay. So right off the bat, you have a larger fund. The CDFI, which stands for Community Development Financial Institution, which is the outfit out of Marquette, what they provide is expertise in reviewing loan applications and qualifying applicants for loans, which I think is actually an improvement over what we had before. But at the end, you still have a board that Grand Traverse County has a seat on reviewing the loan application.
Oh, okay.
And, and the funds can be used regionally, but Grand Traverse County, obviously being the largest player, still probably will have the bulk, the lion's share of the funding requests going forward.
Jason?
For years, the fund as it has been has surprisingly done well. By golly, the county hasn't, mismanaged and lost taxpayers' money, and that's a good thing. But where we are at the point where our government officials play banker, there's only one banker on the board, as far as I know. And I think that's inappropriate, and I think it's inappropriate that government should be managing money to loan to people or businesses. That's the private sector. Government's role is completely different. Government's role is not that of economic development. It's that of creating a level playing field for everybody. I can tell you, when you give one loan to one business and you don't give one loan to another business, that's not a level playing field. That's not something the government ought to be doing. And even if we're passing it off, or passing the buck to the chamber, which is more business-oriented, it's still the taxpayers' money. I'd say, let it die, let the state take the money back, and be done with it. I mean, they do a bad enough job of mismanaging it in Lansing. They give money to the battery makers who are from Korea, who have $300 million to create 100 jobs, and now they're moving out because there just isn't enough there. But in the end, it's just because government's running it. And we ought not be managing the taxpayers' money like that. I'm not going to vote to pass on this responsibility to anybody else. I just as soon keep it and let the state tell us that they're going to take their money back.
Sonny?
Well, I guess my comment is that this money was distributed to local governments to help grow economic development within their communities. We can go back to the whole history of how we got the money in the first place, but, that's not the purpose for tonight's meeting. But the fact is, as long as we have some control over it, we can make sure that that money is spent to improve economic conditions in Grand Traverse County, or at least within our region and community. If the money goes back to the state, the chance of any of it coming north of US 10 again will be 0 for a long time.
Rob?
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Gilman that, I mean, that is taxpayers' dollar. It should never have been coerced from the pockets of the good people of our country to begin with. But the fact is, we're here now, and I think the best thing would be to move this money forward to the chamber as it's being suggested. You know, if that money went back to the state, exactly what the last two commissioners said would happen, it would dissolve. So, you know, unfortunately, it's I think it's a bad situation, but this is the best thing to do with it.
Jason?
I'll be brief. It's just picking winners. That's all it is, just picking winners. So who gets to pick winners? It's not going to be us anymore, it's going to be the chamber.
Larry?
Well, government really isn't picking the winners. It's the individual company owner that would like to expand, either create a new business or expand a current business that is growing and needs a little financial assistance along with their partner and their banking institutions or whatever. And I think it's important for the region and Grand Traverse County to do what we can as elected officials to promote new job creation, business expansion, and provide additional employment for our region and get people back to work. So I'll support the motion.
Any other comments or questions before we vote? Jason?
It's not our job to foster economic development. It's our job to create an environment where it will grow naturally. That's our job. It's not our job to pick who gets to do what on what corner or what section of town or what economic incentives that they get from the taxpayer. This is absurd. This is the classic redistributionist. And I'm telling you, you could say, oh, there's Gilman again doing this, but there is a theme here. It's hard for some people to understand that it's not government's job to go out and pick which businesses are going to survive. You say, well, some businesses, it's up to them to step up to the plate and ask for the money. Well, sure. Why can't they do it with a bank? And if it isn't good enough for the bank, why are they coming to us? And who are we to determine what business is going to be better suited to receive taxpayer money? It's not appropriate. That's the point. It's very clear. I'm sorry. I can't support it. I'm saddened that there are people on this board who will support it.
Okay, does everybody understand Commissioner Wheelock's motion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Lemko?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Maxbauer?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Gilman?
No.
Inman?
Did you say Inman?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And Henschel?
Yes.
And Chairman Fleece?
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you, John. Bill? Next item on the agenda is we have our esteemed county treasurer in attendance to cover it with us.
Esteemed
Good evening, Bill.
Sir Bill Rokas.
or esteemed?
Esteemed Bill Rokas.
Yeah, thank you. First thing I want to say is the first item that I'm going to talk about, it's the redemption of the Woodmere bonds, not the refunding, just so we're clear on that. There's two items that need to be approved or voted on tonight on the redemption of the Woodmere bonds. One is the resolution to allow it, and the second item is, if it is allowed, then would have to be a vote on the amending the lease agreement between the county and the building authority. The redemption of these bonds basically is, we're calling these bonds in. They still had I believe, about 5 years left of, if we had just left them alone. But with the interest rates being what they are, we're going to, basically by calling these bonds, we'll be spending $175,000 less in interest costs. The offset of the earnings that I'm making right now is considerably less than that. And I think at one of our other meetings, I estimated that this would be a net, a conservative net estimate increase of about $87,000 for the county, simply by calling these bonds with cash that we have available in the general fund. So that's the first item.
Would that be the general fund or the delinquent tax fund you're talking about?
The general fund.
General fund, okay.
Sonny?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the resolution approving redemption of the Grand Traverse County Building Authority Bonds Series 2003 prior to maturity.
Support.
Any questions of Bill? Everybody understand the motion? Rob?
I just wanted to say thanks, Bill, for just sound fiscal policy. You've done a great job.
Thanks.
Okay, all in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's unanimous.
And then the second item, since that's been approved, would be to amend the lease agreement between the building authority and the county. And that's necessary because what you just basically approved to do was to advance the cash to the building authority to do the call of these bonds, but then we still have the recording. We didn't want to record those all as expenses in the general fund. We wanted to maintain that same payment back and forth between the county and the building authority, as we had indicated.
And that's where your savings are going to be.
As we indicated when we were dealing with the health bonds, we were, and that's what's on page 36 is the proposed paying back of the $1,315,000. And this can be changed at any time as well, because this is now an agreement strictly between the county and the building authority, and that can be amended at any time, because we're not dealing with bondholders anymore, once the call is completed.
Motion to approve to amend the lease agreement.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported to amend the lease agreement with the building authority. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's unanimous.
Okay, the second item we're presenting today is a refunding of the courthouse bonds, the district and probate court.
The Hall of Justice.
Hall of Justice, thank you. I never remember that. The Hall of Justice bonds. And the reason we're doing a refunding versus a calling on this one is we don't have the cash to do a call on this bond issue. So what we're doing here is taking advantage of the lower interest rates, basically refinancing these bonds. They're callable beginning May 1st. So what we'd like to do is refinance these bonds. We take delivery of the proceeds on May 1st to call the previous bonds, and then we'd start making the payment based on the new bond debt that we would have. And we projected, our financial consultants have projected that we would save, I believe it was $306,000 is their latest projection in interest costs over the life of these bonds. When we presented this to you in December, I think the projection was around $288,000 in savings. So we are moving in a positive direction. And these numbers usually are pretty conservative, so hopefully we'll do better than that.
Ross?
I move that we resolve to allow the treasurer to refund the bonds for the Hall of Justice.
Support. Any other questions or comments? Everybody understand the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion's unanimous.
Linda, I think it's important to note that the changes in the wording should be in our resolutions for our meeting.
Refinancing, refunding.
Yeah,
Oh,
and-
it
and
is,
that's
Herb.
all
It's
adjusted.
just on your agenda here that it was inappropriately.
Right.
Okay.
So it's correct.
Yeah,
on the
it's correct
resolution.
inside,
the
but it
resolution.
wasn't on the agenda.
Yes.
Yeah, but just
So
on the
a-
agenda.
Okay.
Okay, and item number 3.
Yeah, the last item is just to give you an update on the bond sale that we had for the health building that's currently under construction. Based on your resolutions, the billing authority did issue those bonds, and we did the 25-year bond as was requested. The actual sale of the bonds, you'll see, I think we provided you with the, who bid on the bonds, and the savings, or the bond sale actually was, turned out to be much better than we were planning. The initial projection back in December when we were talking to you about the bonds, and what actually we sold the bonds for was result in a reduction of interest costs of $602,000 less than we were projecting. So we continue, during that process, we did confirm that our rating with Standard & Poor's was still maintained at a AA, which is, it's a very good rating. There's very few AAA ratings in the state, and very few AA ratings. So we still maintained our high credit rating. They reviewed all our financials, and we just got some great rates. We basically got a 25-year bond with a 20-year rate is what they were projecting, so. Should save some costs. This bond is basically being funded by the health department. So this, the $600,000 is a lot, but it is spread out over 25 years, so it's not a huge amount every year, but significant when you look at the total.
$24,000 annually.
Yeah, significant when you look at the overall picture. So it was actually a very good sale that we had.
All right, so that's just information purposes.
That's just for information.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is finance.
The first item is our general fund trial balance through the end of December 2011. These are unaudited numbers. The auditors could come in and propose adjustments based on the fact that they have the luxury of more time on their side than I have. But we have closed the books. Bottom line is we finished 2011 better in terms of the fund balance that we planned on using. We had budgeted to use about $670,000 in fund balance, and if you look at the analysis on page 57, you'll see that the actual use of fund balance was $273,168. So that's, in terms of the budget, we did better than we had expected. If you look at the summary on page 57, which what I've done here is provided a summary of revenues by department and the expenditures by department for just the general fund. And, it's a lot of numbers. It's in a format whereby I show the budget, and then the middle column is the actual revenue, and then the variance. And I have more familiarity and knowledge with the numbers simply because I work with this on a regular basis. So it's a little unfair to present you with a summary and expect you to pick up on it. But on the revenue side, obviously the variances that are bracketed are the things that didn't go according to plan, and the big one is the non-departmental. And in that number is the fund balance number, which we had budgeted to use. You're not going to recognize a revenue for your fund balance. That's a use, but yet it's built into the budget. That was a $669,000 number, and it was slightly different than the $625,000 that we planned on because we had something that carried over from the prior year, the digital dictation equipment for central records. But the other main component in that difference is the tax revenue. We had reported to you in April, early May, that based on the equalization report, our taxes were going to come in at $712,000 under budget, and they did. We did not take the budget down for that number. We were reported that we had a number of ways that we would realize the reduction in the budget, and we didn't make that budget amendment, but that was $700,000 of that variance, and the other $213,000 was the Michigan Tax Tribunal adjustments that refunds that we paid out during the year. So that's the big hit on the revenue side, and all of the other variances here can be explained. You know, there's a positive. If you look at the Register of Deeds, we took in $76,000, almost $77,000 more than we budgeted. Another large variance, Central Dispatch, we had budgeted for the increase in the surcharge. That was never approved by the Michigan Public Services Commission, so we're kind of, that's in limbo at this point. But I can explain these variances if anyone would want additional information. I'd be more than happy to provide that. But then if you also turn the page and look at page 58, you can see that most of the variances here are positive variances, which mean that the year-to-date expenditures came in under budget. And a good part of this is due to personnel expenditures. We budget all of the FTEs at 100%, and based on positions that are vacant or people leave and the time that it takes to fill positions, we did realize $712,000 in unexpended personnel, which was offset the loss in tax revenue. That wasn't magical. That we watch every payroll. We know what we expend per payroll, and so that came in as we had told you it would. If you go down to Department 970, the Child Care Fund, that is the main reason why we did not use the fund balance that we planned. That's a $433,000 benefit to the general fund, and if you recall, I asked not to make that appropriation to the Child Care Fund, and we did not make that. But that pretty much explains why we used less fund balance than we had anticipated, and there were no unusual items there. It was simply a function of the fact that we had very favorable numbers in terms of state wards and also neglect and abuse cases over the course of the year. And actually, I'm happy to report that so far, I'm seeing those trends continue in that fund. So,
is there a way that we can do a press release with this kind of information? I don't think we really toot our horn often enough as to how well our employees are doing for the county, because when you talk about the courts are doing a heck of a job because they didn't use the child care fund, and when you start looking at all the reductions in the income and the reductions in the expenses, I just think we should commend all the employees for what a great job they've done, and we ought to let the community know too that they've done a great job.
Well, if I could just add to that, Commissioner, one of the best things that we have going for us here on the expenditure side of the budget is the fact that all of the departments and those individuals in the departments that watch their budgets know that when the board appropriates money for their use, they know they have to live within that budget. And you look down from top to bottom, starting with the Board of Commissioners, the legislative function came in under budget. All of the sheriff's functions for the most part, the general government functions, the courts down below, the appropriation to district court and circuit court came in under budget. So everybody does pay attention to their budget, and without that, it's simple things like before the invoices go to the finance committee to be paid, making those budget amendments so that if they spend more in their supply line item, they know that they've got to give something up someplace else. Those are, we probably go way overboard on that, but that does keep us out of hot water, so to speak. But now the departments all do an excellent job, and the fact that we watch this for significant variances over the year, The volatility lately is on the revenue side. There's no doubt about it.
Chris?
I have a silly question. If you go down to 631, substance abuse, and this is on page 58, the budget is 352,190, expenditure 352,190, but there's a dollar variance.
That's what, spreadsheets, yeah, that should not, there should be no variance there, but I thought you were going to ask what that was for, but I see your point.
No, I was just curious, I mean.
Probably the pennies.
It's government accounting.
I have to accept responsibility for that. I should have.
Sorry, I should have kept my mouth shut.
Well, believe it or not, we had the totals at the bottom on page 57 weren't quite working either, and I said, well, we're going to leave it. But that's the spreadsheet that you use. When you go to the round function, it doesn't always foot in total the way it should.
Sonny?
Dean, I noticed, just because it's a pet peeve of mine probably, equalization's revenues were down from where they expected to be, and the expenses for equalization in East Bay Township were above their budget. If I'm reading this correctly.
I see what you're, yeah, there's not a lot that's budgeted in equalization, which would primarily be, I think we have the plat maps in the GIS department, so I'm really not, I can't explain that variance.
Well, we have a contract in place with East Bay Township, and contract, or fund number 230, which is equalization for East Bay Township, had a deficit. So they didn't even meet their costs, even on your terms, and I've always said there's additional costs being incurred by that office for the equalization in East Bay Township that East Bay Township is not paying for.
Well, if you look at the actual revenue column, the revenue for Department 230 is 128,796, and we invoice them for that exact amount. So we have the mismatch on the budget side, but actual revenue is equal to their cost. We invoice for full cost in that case, so hopefully that's answering your question.
You just got something else in there. I just don't believe it.
What's that?
He just doesn't believe
I don't
he
believe
says.
it. You know, there is too much part of the equalization that's being done in the equalization department that East Bay Township is not being paid, not being billed for.
Well,
And of course, I've always contended, there's a reason there's a separation. The townships do their assessing, and then the county equalization department reviews those assessments and makes sure that everything's right, and then the state tax tribunal reviews those. There is a procedure. When the county goes and does the assessing for a particular township, you take out the checks and balances.
I would agree.
I'm not going to comment on that. I know that when, the comment I will make, we do have staff that are designated and charged through payroll directly to that cost center, and we bill, I certainly have no way of determining how they spend their time. But we do bill for 100% of the cost that's charged to that cost center.
As identified.
As identified. I would, after you've had a chance to look at this, if you have any questions, just let me know and I will try to answer them.
Okey dokey.
If there are no other questions, I do want to kind of walk you through the budget adjustments. Starting on page 59 is the summary, but the adjustments actually start on page 60. The first one is adjusting the budget. Now that we know what the remonumentation grant is, it's just taking it up to the full or 100% of the grant amount. We had budgeted the surveyor's personnel expenditures in that budget as part of the adopted budget, and this brings it up to the balance of the grant. The next adjustment is a carryover of a Rotary Charities grant from 2011. It was a $15,000 grant, and we expended $1,500, so we're carrying the balance to 2012. On page 61, This is budgeting the CDBG housing grant administrative function. It's primarily covering the cost of the employee that we now have in our planning and development department to administer those grants. On page 62, the first item is a carryover of funds for the Commission on Aging for an office remodel that they planned to do in 2011. That work was not completed. And then the big adjustment on the bottom of page 62, Commissioner Maxbauer brought this to your attention, I believe, last week. The adjustment that was necessary for the tax revenue that was overestimated. It's unfortunate that the tax revenue has to be reduced and the fund balance has to be used, but hopefully they will not fully expend those dollars in their 2012 budget.
Can you explain why there's a list of numbers here? Is that a number of years? Is that what that is?
No, what the fund balance and the tax revenue is actually spread through the different departments in the budget. So this is an allocation of that tax revenue.
The individual departments of Commission on
Of that
Aging.
fund, yes.
I see.
Correct. And that's the...
But the 320,000 shortfall is 1 year, though.
It's what we had overestimated for 2012. It's the current year.
Oh, the current year, okay.
We wanted to make that adjustment sooner rather than later.
Motion to approve the budget adjustments as presented.
Support.
Been moved and supported to approve the budget adjustments as outlined. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's unanimous, passes. Next item is the TMA contract.
I don't know if I should start by saying I'm open for suggestions here, but, well, I can't do that. But what I did here was Ernie and myself, we met with Bob Cooney because we were having issues with interpreting the contract. And this I discussed with you either last month, I actually think it was in December, because we were invoiced for $63,000 worth of services that were done under the contract for the personal property tax discovery. And it was clear that based on the information that we had received from the tax commission, the state tax commission, that there was not a lot of value here in a number of cases. And what I've tried to do on page 63 is I have all of that detail, and we tallied up the total discovered value, and it's $3.8 million. And the number that I've calculated here is based on the county millage, the pavilions, and the 2 Commission on Aging millages, and applying that millage to that taxable value would generate $23,691.44 in revenue. And the reason I'm starting with this is because the item on the next page explains one of the issues in terms of how we interpret the contract. The issue I had with this initially was I was surprised when these bills started showing up in late November and early December. Certainly did not understand how this worked, but because I have inherited this issue, and Ernie has been a big help, and Bill has actually also worked on this, and of course I've got to give Bob Cooney a lot of credit because he took the time to review the contract. And this paragraph on revenue neutral, the issue for me, when you get a bill for $250 and the taxable value for 2 or 3 years, if that's the period of time that these discoveries have covered, doesn't generate $250 in tax revenue.
Right.
So what we did, we obtained all of those documents, and I've got a spreadsheet that tallies them all up to come back to the 3.8 million. And the reason for Bob's memo is to what is the county actually responsible for here? And Bob is telling us, if you read his opinion, that it should be just the county millages. I mean, if it's revenue neutral to the county, we shouldn't include millages for other entities that we
Right.
don't receive the revenue
Right.
for. And the only other aspect of this that we really can't calculate at this time is the interest and penalties that would be due, because some of these discoveries go back to 2009. It goes back a period of time. So our plan is to, as the local units settle with the county treasurer, we're going to, settle on these amounts, and we'll know exactly what the tax revenue is that's generated. But I know there's been a lot of discussion on this. You've had calls from taxpayers about, why this was done or how it was done, and the issue for me is I told you I would not make a payment on these invoices without talking to you. I did not want to make the payment and have the finance committee say, what are you doing here? So that's why I'm back to have this discussion.
Jason?
This really, we've heard you don't want to do away with the personal property tax, you don't know what it's going to cost you, but boy, when it comes down to trying to squeeze out every last nickel out of our community, we really look bad on this. We're not getting anything extra. We've gone through a process where we've really ticked off a lot of our constituents, and frankly, the time that it takes to collect a couple of dollars is so much more valuable than the couple of dollars we collected, and it's just a shame, and it's incredible that we went through this for this result.
Chris?
Well, if there was ever a vote that I could take back, it would be this one. It's in the top 10. This was a mistake, in my opinion. However, we have an obligation. And so it is with great reluctance that I make the motion to authorize payment to Tax Management Associates Incorporated in the amount of $23,691.44 with the balance of the interest and associated fees paid after we settle with the local units.
I'll second that motion for discussion.
Larry?
I guess my question is, does this end it? Because as far as I'm concerned, I agree with Commissioner Max Bauer. Whatever we've done through the end of the year or year-to-date with this company, if this contract, I don't want this contract to continue. I just soon give them the notice that we're going to discontinue the service and the contract, square up with them, and then move on.
I wish I could tell you, Commissioner Inman, that this ends it, but it's my understanding that there are additional discovered properties that will be going to the Tax Commission in April. For some reason, we are, I'm not sure of why, but there has been a break. We have been invoiced for $63,000 worth of services at $250 of discovered property. I don't know if the additional round of work can be ended that easily. I'll have to talk to Ernie about that. And another issue with personal property tax is ultimately the collection of the tax, because, that's up to the local unit treasurers to ensure, and those, we're not purchasing the outstanding personal property. We purchased the delinquent real.
So other than what's in the tax tribunal, is this program ended? They've gone through the whole process, or are they partly through the process? Because
They have finished their discovery services, but there are a group of, or a batch of additional properties, I believe, that still have to go to the tax commission.
Okay.
And it's the tax commission then says yea or nay.
All right.
That these are valid, discoveries, and then they go back to the local units to be invoiced and billed as.
So no one else is going to be getting any more letters? They've completed their task?
That is my understanding.
All right.
But they're going to have to appear before the tax tribunal.
Rob?
Do you want to comment on?
Dean?
Could we have Bill, I certainly don't want to misspeak here, but Bill is the expert in this regard.
The expert, but there is a group that, everything that's been through the tribunal so far has been billed. As far as I know, the townships have billed them, and we'll be settling with the townships when they come in March. I'm going to do a separate settlement with all the townships on those 3 years for the personal property. All the township have agreed to keep those separate out of their current tax collection. They have separate databases for those delinquent or omitted personal properties. So we will have an idea of what they've collected or what they're not collecting on the ones that have gone through the State Tax Commission Tribunal. But there is a group, they only meet once a month to go over these omitted properties. And there was a large amount, I don't know how many there are yet, but I was told they will be finalized, I believe, in April of this year, of 2012. And once those are decided, then there'll be a determination made as to what is going to be billed to those other personal property statements that were in that batch. So those individuals still, if they're appealing that, then they're going to have to appeal that at that hearing. So, so those individuals, either they agree with what's been taken to the tribunal, or they appeal, or they go down and fight and try to get it reduced. So we don't know at this point, what the outcome of that tribunal is going to be yet until April. So this issue is not going to be finalized, at least until we know what the decision is made on those remaining parcels. But I don't know the exact number. I know it's pretty significant.
It's a significant number
but
of cases.
Yeah.
I heard from Ernie that it was similar or comparable in amount to the $63,000 that we've been billed. That's not value, but that's the number of discovered properties that are still potentially going to the tax code.
My question, Dean, was, has TMA agreed that this is the amount that we currently owe?
No.
Okay.
No, they call me every day on this, and I'm...
Oh, boy.
Keep calling. You know that I return calls, but this is one where it's been hard for me to, without talking to you, I feel very comfortable with Bob's opinion. If we go to court on this, Bob's going to be right there with me, but...
Well, my experience as a CEO of a corporation, having dealt with companies that delivered questionable services, you do not pay them a dime until we agree that this is the full amount we owe you, and you will go away once paid. So I would invite the mover and seconder to vote no on their motion until we have a final dollar amount. That way we don't end up in court.
That is good advice, and after the meeting tonight where I wasn't sure if you were going to authorize me to make any payment, and I'm glad you're suggesting this because I don't know.
Me too.
Their interpretation, here's my concern with this. If they've invoiced the county for $250 a parcel, to me, I think that means that they feel that we owe them $250. So they're probably looking at the combined county millage, but we don't collect all of that millage. So I think there could be an issue with how it's interpreted.
I'll withdraw the second.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Do we have a new motion?
No.
Ross?
That we authorize Dean Bott to attempt to negotiate a settlement price based on the $23,000 bill that we think we owe.
Support.
Okay, if I could suggest something, Dean, I agree with Rob. I don't think this board's willing to pay any amount until it's completely settled as to what the final total is, and they go away, or I guess we'll go to litigation maybe.
I have no issue with that at all. I don't have a lot of comfort with this from the language issue, but also from not knowing what's still potentially outstanding.
Sonny?
Well, I'm not sure if I've done my math right, but it looks to me like this $63,000 that they billed us for is only about 252 identified people, and there were 100 in Long Lake Township alone. So 252 is a very, very small piece of what they identified as people that should be paying personal property tax. You know, unlike Ms. Baxbar, I don't have to feel bad about my vote because I was consistent the first time, and I still am. And under no circumstances until
Well,
this
put
thing
a
is...
dunce cap on my head and put me in the
No,
corner.
it is-
I gotta tell you.
Until such time as we know the final revenue received by the county through this discovery process and the tax money, the county tax money that we've actually collected, I will not support paying them one penny.
Jason?
I just, it is interesting, I have a reasonable amount of equipment. It's not a lot, shelves and a couple of desks. But I think we paid our winter taxes, it was like $20. It's hard for me to imagine the people who were missing from the system that they were calling. Like the one call I got from my son, who 8 years ago filed a DBA, and they were calling and asking if this business existed. And, he's long gone and living in another town, And I don't know what they consider, a find or what they're billing us for, but I mean, it's absurd that it could get to that kind of level, $63,000, and these people would not know that they're supposed to be paying personal property tax and already be in the system somehow, so,
Well, and even if you were exempt, they identified that you were supposed to have filed.
Yeah.
Right.
And they billed you $250.
Well, I was getting calls from constituents that were getting letters and to report down to the tax tribunal for a $20 bill or something that would cost $20 or something like that. And they called me up and I went, what? So I went over and grabbed the letter and came back to the county and raised all kinds of heck on it and got the answer. All you had to do is this lady was getting charged a depreciated amount on a 5-year computer that was actually costed 5 years ago, $1,000. Now it's not worth hardly anything. And I just said, send in your $5, $6, $7, $8 and it's over with. And so that's what she did. But these people were being threatened for these such low dollar amounts that they had to report down to the Michigan Tax Tribunal. I mean, this thing got blown way out of perspective in terms of what our agreement was with this board. In terms of my understanding of how this thing was supposed to work, is they were to come in to identify the list that had not filed, and then we were going to send a nice polite letter to ask people to file, and that is as far as this board was going to go, and the equalization department and that company was to go. And when, I'm just outraged that it got to the point where, people started getting phone calls at home repeatedly, and that they were being summoned by the Michigan Tax Tribunal. I mean, there was never any representation from this board, as far as I'm concerned, that they had the authority to go to that extent.
The problem is, Larry, when you told her to send the $5, as far as TMA is concerned, they discovered a person who wasn't filing their personal property tax, and they're going to bill you $250.
I think it was a communication problem. They forgot to, when they called, they forgot to say, we were sent here from the government to help you.
Yes, hi, we're from the government, and we're here to help you.
Yeah.
But as far as the motion, that would include anything that's pending with the tax tribunal, correct?
Yeah, I just didn't have a settle out at that point in time.
I guess I'm concerned about the motion, that I just don't feel that we should make a motion to do anything at this point. That we should wait until the final information and then bring the motion be forward as to what we're going to do. So I just have a problem trying to approve this motion when, in fact, we don't have all the information, and I would rather wait and bring a new motion in May or June after everything's come through, and then make a final approval to what we think the offer should be to pay it.
I agree with that.
Ross?
Well, I think you're right about that, Herb, except that I do think we need to at least start the process. I think we need to, give Dean something to work on to acknowledge the bills. I mean, you just can't keep ignoring a bill forever and ever and ever. I mean, I doubt very much they'll accept the $23,000, and I can't imagine anything being resolved very quickly, but at least it's a starting point. So.
Yeah, I think we, the board, need to have the motion, just like it stated, that we don't pay, or we authorize Dean not to pay anything until the matter's totally resolved.
Right.
Well, the motion calls for him to negotiate the settlement.
Yeah, see, that's what I had the problem.
And I'm not prepared to negotiate any settlement until I know what all of it is.
Right.
Right.
And I don't want to dump that on Dean's lap either.
So who made that motion?
I did. So
Well,
You wanna
let's
keep
see
it?
what Dean says.
I'll withdraw it if that's what the board thinks we should do.
We need to look into this. I mean, I need to know what the answer is. Bob has given us his interpretation. I'll call them tomorrow. They've been calling every day for a week, and I'll start that discussion with them, and I can report back in 2 weeks as to what they're comfortable with. And, it's either going to be the $63,000 and here's why, or it's, the $23,000, and it could be somewhere in the middle. I don't want to pay them any more than we absolutely have to.
I don't think we're in a hurry at all, Dean.
Neither am I. I'm very comfortable with you just having me work with them to resolve this.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Withdraw the
Okay.
motion.
But you have a wish.
Okay.
Who was the second?
Me.
Good.
You were? Okay.
Everybody
Motion's
understand the motion?
Motion's
No, we withdraw.
Motion and the
Oh,
second are
withdrawn?
both withdrawn.
We're withdrawing.
Well, I don't know why we need a motion.
No.
Well,
No, we don't.
Dean has his direction. and-
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's got a direction.
Moving right along.
And Dean, if they want to know who said, just tell them Mr. Rokas.
Tell him to call me.
That won't be necessary.
Yeah.
Okay,
Tell them to call
let's
me, I
see
never
where we're
answer
at
my
here.
phone.
Septic.
Septic Treatment Facility Fund trial balance.
This is, I thought this would be of particular interest too. We also closed our septic treatment facility fund. We closed all of the funds at the end of January for 2011, but we ended the year with a cash deficit, and quite a bit of what was said in the most recent Record Eagle article was not totally accurate, but
Imagine that.
if you look at, this is, it's hard to explain this, but when you look at this trial balance, which is for this fund, the revenue control, we had revenues of $500-some thousand. I think it's $547,000 greater than expenditures. So there's no operating loss here. We actually ended the year with revenues greater than expenditures, and that's in addition to the fund balance. This fund technically doesn't have a fund balance. It has a net asset position, but no cash. The county did have to advance cash. The county treasurer covered the cash deficit. That was $102,178.55, which is equal to that 214.05 account, the due to primary government. And 50% of that, per the agreement that we have with the townships, I need to invoice them for their share of the cash. I was looking at our cash balance today. It's actually, the operation through February 15th has used an additional $43,000 in cash. But, two things here. We had to cover a cash deficit, which we do that in some of our other funds as well. That's not anything different from what we've had to do in years past. But we have ended the year with a revenue over expenditure situation, so we will not have a deficit to report to the state or a plan to submit, so that's a good thing for now. Going forward, we're a month and a half into the year, and the operations are not covering, the cash flow, so we will have to deal with this issue.
At least part of that is seasonal.
Right.
Correct. I mean, it will pick up, but, you know, at the point in time when we have those, the debt service payments are due, I think May 1st and November 1st, that's when you have the big use of cash, and probably be okay come May, but, you know, when we get into the larger payment that includes the principal at the next November, you know, that's where we'll have an issue.
Larry?
Well, I just want to remind the board that the guaranteeing townships have been meeting with the non-guaranteeing townships on a regular basis, and they've come up with a number of feasible options to make this plant revenue neutral. One of the options is to refinance the bonds when they come callable in October of 2012. The payment does not come due until November of 2012. So I just want to give you one indication. There's a possibility they may come back and ask us to refinance those bonds before that payment is due, and technically the payment would not be required to be paid in 2012 for the November payment if that is refinanced in October. So we would have to take a look at the amortization schedule and the balance without making that payment, and then see what the cost savings is to operations based on a certain term and a certain interest rate. But that's something that the G5 and the non-guaranteeing townships are looking at. They're also looking at a half a dozen other options that could just get us right out of it. So stay tuned, because I think they're doing a good job.
Okay, anybody have any other questions regarding that? Next item on the agenda, thank you, Dean, is unfinished business. I don't believe we have any.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Fairly quick.
Next item is new business. There's none listed. Next item is the second public comment. I see we have 5 young scholars sitting in the room that perhaps after an evening with us, they'd like to get up and comment on their observations.
We have to sign their forms.
You guys interested at all?
You get an extra star if you do it.
Yeah.
Had to be
Well,
here, huh?
they're looking awful bashful, but
This guy
remember,
wants to.
you could be
He
sitting...
so wants to right here in the end here. He wants to get up and say something.
See, you guys could be sitting up here someday too, so don't say, geez, what a boring meeting, because you may have to sit here too. Because we were in your shoes at one time.
Many years
Okay, seeing none,
ago.
we'll move on to Commissioner Committee reports. Chris?
I've got just one. I went to the, I am the Parks representative to the T-Base Board, and at their board meeting last evening, they reported that their spring soccer tournament has 170 teams signed up so far. And so that's going to be a real plus for our community. And I also wanted to mention, I don't know if anybody noticed this, when we met with Representative Schmidt and Senator Walker. But our department head sat there for an hour, waiting. They were after us on the agenda. And it struck me when Bob Cooney sat there for an hour, listening to us talk with our representatives about road funding and legislation that's pending. Mr. Cooney wanted to make a point on the fact that Michigan was losing one of its toxologists, and or toxicologist, I don't know what you call it, but the guy that does DNA sampling, in case anybody doesn't know, in case I'm not pronouncing it right. But I really think at the next meeting that we ought to put the department heads first on the agenda, so if they don't, that way they can choose to stay for our discussion with our representatives, or they can get up and leave and go back to work. You know, I greatly appreciate the fact that Mr. Cooney thought it was important enough to stay there and make his point when his turn came. Jamal did the same thing, but I really think that the next time we meet, that the department heads ought to come first on the agenda with the representatives, and we ought to come second.
I would agree with that. Jason?
I agree.
Yeah, it's not a bad comment.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with that. Sonny?
It is with great pride I have the opportunity to tell you, as of last night, all 16 local
All right.
units passed
All
unanimously the solid waste plan.
All right. Thanks, Sonny, for all your
So
hard
that
work.
will be
Congratulations.
forwarded to the state of Michigan. And, stay tuned. Ordinance 17 will be coming soon.
Okay, all right, congratulations.
Herb?
I think a great gratitude goes to Sonny and Bob to putting this together, but particular Sonny for making the driving force to make sure this has happened. And Sonny, I just personally like to say thank you, and I think all the taxpayers in our community want to say thank you also. So the other thing I'd like to say is that Garfield Township last night recommended to the Liquor Control Commission that 2 liquor licenses be issued to, one to Opa's at the Cherryland Mall, and the other to the Flapjack Shack. And their process that they did, they had 4 applicants, and they had a spreadsheet that they put together, tried to decide who was going to have most impact. Both these businesses are long-term businesses that have been in Traverse City that now have a chance to expand their businesses.
And Flapjack Shack, in their business plan, mentioned that they're going to add 22 employees.
Yeah.
So
So-
that's a
All
real
right.
plus. I've got one other.
Chris?
Yeah,
I don't know how commissioners feel about this. This is more in the comments section, I guess. I would like to have on our next agenda, I don't care if it's Ways and Means, whatever it is, I want one of those. I am tired of boxes of paper. The staff time that it takes, I understand that some people like paper, but I'm ready to go paperless. And I have to believe that Commissioner Henschel has more than paid for his county iPad. So I would just like to have it as an agenda item because I want to go paperless.
All right.
Actually, I was going to recommend, a thought was, based on the dollars this actually does save, it's cheaper to run an iPad based on the piles of paper and printing and copy time. If maybe as part of commissioner compensation, we have a reimbursement towards an electronic device up to a certain amount. And that way, the county doesn't have to worry about supporting and tracking where their equipment is. It's just be our own stuff based on what we're saving the county.
Larry?
Yeah, I mean, at Northern Michigan University, when I got on for the second time, basically what they did is they emailed you the agenda, and then when you came in to the boardroom, everybody had a PC with the agenda on it, and it also showed on the screen as well during presentation times.
Laptops are cheaper than
So,
iPads.
so it worked out really well, and it was a culture change for everybody, but I got over it. But, I'm old-fashioned, as you know, this is my computer right here, and that's why I'm in physical therapy. So, any event, I'm the old-fashioned guy that still likes to scribble and make notes on the agenda page and stuff like that, but there is merit, and I think Dennis's thought when he originally presented this to the board back then was, let's have a trial by one commissioner or 2 commissioners about how well it works and do they like it.
well.
And then for those commissioners that would like to take it, let's budget some money to buy them for the commissioners that want it, and the commissioners that just want the piece, they can pick them up off their box, or they can be mailed. But
Okay, we'll just have to make sure that's on a future.
we'll get it on the agenda. I'll have Chris put it on the agenda for RMA.
We got a guy waiting for us.
I have a report on Northern Lake CMH. Just spent the last 3 days at the Michigan Association of County Mental Health Boards Conference down in Lansing, so just skidded back into town this afternoon to make this meeting. A lot of good information. One of the interesting pieces of legislation that's coming up this month in the state Senate, and it seems to have momentum in both the House and Senate and with the governor, so it'll probably happen, and that is to combine substance abuse programs, which currently we're with NIMSAS, which is I think it's a 30-county organization. The bill is to combine that with CMHs. So all the extra, duplications of administration would just fall under CMH. And it seems to be a good fit. There's concern about the transitions and whatnot, but that's something I thought was interesting. Also, on our agenda for tomorrow night's Northern Lake CMH meeting is an attorney opinion that completely contradicts our prosecutor's opinion.
That's a surprise.
And in fact, the way I read it, basically, if we follow his opinion, we're going to dissolve Northern Lakes Community Mental Health because he's saying that a county cannot transfer any of their responsibilities to another organization. Well, okay, then I guess we don't have a mental health authority anymore because that's all our responsibility. So that should be an interesting discussion tomorrow. I'll get you guys a copy if you're interested in reading that, but I'll definitely get one to our Mr. Cooney.
We got a guy waiting for us.
Yep, we're getting there. Notices and announcements. I have something I'd like to comment on, and I'd like staff to look into it. We had the recent incident of the horses starving to death, and I happen to know some people, in fact, that know the person that reported it, and she reported it starting way back in early October and never got any response from any governmental unit. So consequently, there's no worse way to die than in the cold and no food. And if that woman would have just let those horses out, the horses could have fended for themselves. That's a horrible way for any mammal to die. We humans are mammals, and I would like, Dean, when you get a chance, I'd like that looked into by someone, and I want to find out why nobody went out. If anybody would have went out there, animal control took one look, pretty obvious the horses were starving back in October, but to let two of them die, and like the lady, the neighbor, the reporting person, says, finally the horses are so weak they can't even get up. She's watching them trying to get up.
Jeez.
So they come out, they kill the horses. I won't use the word euthanize, because what they did is kill the horses because of lack of human involvement and dignity. So they kill the horses and they leave them there. And so the lady is on the phone again. She's looking out her window. She can see the horses. And I think that went way too far. I think the county bears a lot of responsibility because they certainly had jurisdiction through either the health department, the animal control, or the sheriff's department. I know, and I'll speak from my past, in the city, that's a state law. Any sworn law enforcement officer can enforce state law. If that had happened in the city, we'd have went and we'd have looked. And we would have taken appropriate action. Wouldn't wait until several horses died, 2 horses died, and several more were in bad shape. And I guess I don't understand why it has to go to that thing. Like I said, if you look at World War II, when they opened the concentration camps after we liberated them, look what came out of there. That's a horrible, horrible way to die. And if you ever seen any pictures of them and the wheelbarrows dumping them in the pits, that's in effect what was going on out here. And I don't think that should occur anywhere in the United States, much less Grand Traverse County.
Commissioner Fleece, I'll just speak to that briefly. Certainly, there's always 2 sides to every story, and the Record Eagle will do what they need to do to sell papers, and that doesn't always involve telling both sides of a story. The girl, Nikita Booth, who's the daughter of the person that was charged in this case, is a former employee of our family business, and I tell you, I never met anyone that loved horses as much as her and cared for her horse. She lived for those horses, and it's hearsay, but based on what she told me, is one of those horses was already a rescue horse. They were trying to to get healthy again. And the other one, they believe had bad food, but just from what she told me briefly in passing, was that the county has refused to order an autopsy to figure out what was really going on, but she is buying an autopsy herself so that she can prove that this wasn't a neglect case. She worked with us for a couple of years, and she was, I'm not taking sides, certainly, but this neighbor apparently was calling about a lot of different things for several years. It seems to be a case of neighbor dispute as well. So, like I said, I'm not taking sides. There's two sides to every story, and that's all I wanted to point out.
Rob, you're a young man. I grew up on a farm. I've had horses for 40-some years. And let me tell you, forget the print, just the pictures in the Record Eagle, it's very obvious what happened to those horses. There's no disease. If this person and are talking about, she didn't do anything other than say to the Record Eagle, well, they were fine Friday, and here it is Monday, and they're dead. I don't buy it. Common sense. You look with your eyes, forget the verbiage. Those horses starved to death, and those people responsible for keeping them penned up, like I said, they could have cut the fence, they could have opened the gate, the horses would have lived and been fine. That isn't what happened. And I'm not taking sides. All I'm doing is saying there's laws, we didn't enforce the laws, and it costs horrible death to them horses. And I don't care if it's a horse, a cat, a cow, it's wrong. In my opinion.
All right.
Sonny?
I'd like to get back to the agenda and move to go into closed session with the attorneys in regard to Carlson versus Jetter.
Second.
Then,
Before we vote on it, I know we're going to be out of here for a little while. It might not be a bad idea to get your sheets out.
You guys need
Get 'em signed
signatures, you got to
before
get them now.
And then, also, I know everybody would probably need to take a short break, but don't dwell on anything, and we're meeting right here.
Yeah, and then MMRA is available by conference call.
oh, he's not here?
No, they decided to call, they have a team calling in.
Chris is here too.
Am I right? Okay, I got
Okay,
you.
yeah.
You got an extra one of those, I'll sign it and go.
Can we vote so we can go use the restroom?
Yes. Can we vote?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, roll call vote, please.
Yeah, we'll need a roll call vote on the motion.
Commissioner Lemkool,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yeah.
Max Bauer,
Yes.
Wheelock,
Yes, ma'am.
Here, guys.
Gilman,
Yes.
Inman,
Here, yes.
Henschel,
Make sure you get your
You got an
agenda.
extra one, I'll
Chairman,
sign it.
please.
Yeah.
They're out there on the, yep.
No, we're not going to let you go home.
Brandy worked for my grandmother.
Go out of session right now.
Motion to
Session, all in favor?
Aye. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to
All done.
Good
Motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Aye. We're adjourned.
Aye.
We're done.
We're adjourned.
Yeah, we had a quorum.
We had a quorum, so.